My daughter looked me in the eye at my own kitchen table and said, "Mom, I just think it would be better if you weren't there." She was talking about her wedding. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I picked up my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and said, "Okay, sweetheart, whatever you think is best." She looked almost surprised that I didn't fight her on it. Maybe she expected tears. Maybe she expected me to beg. But I had spent 63 years on this earth learning when to speak and when to go quiet. And that morning, I went very, very quiet. I need to back up, though, because none of this makes sense without understanding who my daughter is and who I am and how we got to that kitchen table moment. My name is Gloria. I'm 63 years old. I live in a small house in Dayton, Ohio, the same house I bought when my daughter was 2 years old, working double shifts at the hospital as a dietary aide and taking weekend bookkeeping jobs on the side just to make the down payment. I paid off that mortgage 11 years ago. It's not a fancy house. The back porch lists a little to the left, and the guest bathroom faucet has had a slow drip since 2019 that I keep meaning to fix. But it's mine. Every single square foot of it is mine. My daughter's name is Melissa. She's 31 now. She grew up in that little house, ate breakfast at that kitchen table, learned to ride her bike in that driveway. I raised her alone after her father left when she was 4. He wasn't a bad man, just not a present one. He moved to Phoenix, remarried, had 2 more kids. He sent birthday cards until Melissa was about 12. Then those stopped too. So it was just the 2 of us for a long time. I worked hard to give Melissa opportunities I never had. I put her through community college, then helped her transfer to Ohio State. I didn't have the money to pay full tuition. No one's going to mistake me for wealthy, but I contributed what I could, and she worked part-time, and she got through it. She graduated with a degree in marketing and got a job at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. I was so proud of her, I cried the whole drive home from her graduation. Then she met Griffin. Griffin's family is from Westerville, which isn't far from Columbus geographically, but it might as well be a different planet from Dayton. His father owns 3 commercial properties and a logistics company. His mother, from what I can tell, has never worked a day in her adult life. They belong to a country club. They take vacations to places I can't pronounce. They are the kind of people who say things like, "We summer in the Outer Banks," and mean it without irony. I met Griffin once before the engagement. Melissa brought him to Thanksgiving. He was perfectly polite. Shook my hand firmly, complimented the house, ate 2 helpings of my sweet potato casserole. I thought he seemed a little stiff, a little rehearsed, but I told myself that was just nerves. Meeting your girlfriend's parent is nerve-wracking for anyone. After that Thanksgiving, I didn't see Melissa much. She'd been coming home every 6 weeks or so before she met Griffin. We'd have dinner, watch something on TV, catch up. After Griffin, the visits stretched every 3 months, then to holidays only. I told myself this was normal. She was building a life. She was in love. I didn't want to be the clingy mother who made her feel guilty for growing up. The engagement happened in March. She called me from Griffin's parents' house, and I could hear people celebrating in the background. Champagne popping, his mother squealing. I said all the right things. I told her I was thrilled, asked to see the ring on video call, said Griffin was a lucky man. She laughed and said she had to go. They were going out to dinner. She'd call me later in the week. She called 2 weeks later. By early summer, I realized I hadn't been introduced to Griffin's parents. Every time I mentioned meeting them, Melissa said something vague. They were busy. There was a lot going on with the wedding planning. It wasn't a great time. I let it go once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th time, something small and cold settled in my chest. Not quite suspicion. Not yet. Just an awareness that something wasn't adding up. The wedding was set for October. It was the end of July when Melissa came to Dayton, the first time she visited since Easter, and sat down at my kitchen table and told me she thought it would be better if I wasn't there. I asked her to explain what she meant. She couldn't quite look at me. She was turning her engagement ring around and around on her finger, which she does when she's nervous. She said that Griffin's family had a certain vision for the wedding, that it was going to be a large formal event, 300 guests, a venue in Dublin, Ohio that cost more than I make in a year. She said his parents were heavily involved in the planning and they had, and here she paused for a long time. They had certain expectations about the aesthetic, about the guest list, about how things would look. I said, and I don't fit the aesthetic. She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. She said she just thought it might be less stressful for everyone if I watched the live stream from home. That she'd make sure I had a good view, that she'd call me right after the ceremony. I want to tell you I stayed perfectly composed. I mostly did on the outside, but inside something happened that I don't have a clean word for. It wasn't just hurt. It was a kind of slow, clarifying anger, the kind that doesn't make you want to shout. It makes you want to think, very carefully, very clearly. I said, "Okay, sweetheart. Whatever you think is best." She left an hour later looking relieved, which told me everything I needed to know. I called my sister Roberta that evening. Roberta is 4 years older than me and has zero patience for nonsense, which is exactly what I needed. I told her the whole conversation. There was a long pause on her end, and then she said, "Gloria, she used your credit card to pay for half this wedding." She was right. And that's the part I haven't told you yet. About 2 months after the engagement, Melissa had asked if she could use my credit card for some wedding deposits. Just temporarily, she said, until the venue payment came through from Griffin's family, who were contributing a large sum but needed a few weeks. She said she'd transfer the money back to my account within the month. I said yes because I am her mother and I trusted her. I gave her the card number over the phone. The month passed, then another. I checked my statement in June and saw that the balance had climbed to just over $8,000. Florist deposits, a cake consultation fee, a DJ retainer, a decor vendor, and something listed simply as venue coordination. When I called Melissa to ask about the reimbursement, she said Griffin's family had run into a delay with a property sale, but it would definitely be sorted before the wedding. Not to worry. I did not want to worry. I tried very hard not to worry. I paid the minimum on the card so I didn't take a credit hit and told myself this was temporary. After the kitchen table conversation, I stopped telling myself that. I pulled my full credit card statement and sat down with it for about 2 hours. $8,340. That was the number. The florist alone was $2,200. The DJ retainer was $1,200. There were 2 charges I didn't recognize at all and had to call the card company about. I want to be precise here because I think precision matters. Melissa did not forge my signature. She did not commit fraud. I had given her permission to use the card, but she had told me the money would be returned within a month. It had now been almost 3 months. I had just been asked not to attend the wedding that this money was paying for, and not once in our conversation at the kitchen table did she mention the card, the money, or when any of it might come back to me. That told me something about what she was planning. I didn't call her the next day, or the day after that. I gave myself a week to think without emotion, which is hard, but I've had practice. When you raise a child alone for 27 years, you get very good at waiting until you can think straight. Then I called the florist. I introduced myself as the card holder whose account had been used for the deposit. I explained that I needed to discuss the status of the booking. The florist was very professional, very kind. She confirmed the deposit amount and the arrangement details. 240 white and blush arrangements, centerpieces for 30 tables, ceremony arch installation, bridal party florals. She said the remaining balance of $6,000 was due 30 days before the event. I said I needed to cancel. She walked me through the cancellation policy. Because the event was more than 60 days away, I was eligible for a partial refund of the deposit, 60% back to my card. I said that would be fine. I gave her my information, confirmed my identity, and we ended the call. Then I called the DJ. Same conversation. He was less pleasant about it. Said his policy was no refund within 90 days, and we were at 88 days. I told him I understood his policy, and I accepted that. The $1,200 retainer was gone, and that was the consequence of letting things go this long. That was on me, and I accepted it. The cake consultation place turned out to be a full bakery booking, a 4-tier custom cake, balance of $2,800 due 60 days before the event. I canceled. Partial refund, similar terms to the florist. The decor vendor, that one took me 3 calls to even reach someone, but when I did, same process. Cancel. partial refund where eligible. The venue coordination charge was from a day of coordinator service. I canceled that too. By the end of the week, I had initiated cancellations on every vendor my card had paid for. Some refunds would come back, some wouldn't. But I had stopped the bleeding, and more importantly, I had stopped contributing money to an event I wasn't invited to. I didn't tell Melissa. I want you to understand that I thought about telling her. I thought about calling her and having the full conversation. The card, the money, the wedding, the kitchen table, all of it at once. I drafted that conversation in my head about 15 times. But every time I got to the end of it, I realized that if I called and confronted her, one of two things would happen. Either Griffin's family would scramble to replace the vendors, and the whole situation would continue as planned, with me still sitting at home watching a live stream. Or Melissa would feel humiliated and blame me for ruining her wedding, and we'd carry that wound for decades. Neither of those outcomes served anyone. So I waited. I watered my tomato plants. I took my evening walks. I had Roberta over for dinner twice, and we talked about everything except the wedding. I slept reasonably well, which surprised me. I think when you've made a decision clearly and deliberately, the anxiety goes somewhere else. It has nothing left to grip. October arrived. The wedding was on a Saturday. That Friday evening, my phone rang. It was Melissa, and she didn't say hello. She said, "Mom, did you cancel the florist?" I said, "Yes." "The DJ?" "Yes." "The cake?" "Mom, what did you do?" I sat down in my kitchen chair and I said, "Melissa, I canceled every vendor that my credit card was used to book." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said my name, not Mom, my name, Gloria, in a tone I haven't heard from her since she was a teenager caught in a lie. "You can't do that. The wedding is tomorrow." "I know when the wedding is," I said. "You told me I didn't need to be there." I was trying to reduce my involvement. She started crying. I stayed quiet. She said it wasn't the same thing. She never meant. She just thought it would be less stressful. She didn't mean for me to. She said the florist wouldn't have any arrangements ready. The cake wasn't made. There was no music lined up. I said, "Melissa, I gave you permission to use my credit card for deposits that you said would be paid back within 1 month. It has been almost 4 months. The balance is over $8,000. I was told I wasn't wanted at the event that my money was paying for. I made the only decision that made sense to me." Another long silence. Then I heard her talking to someone else in the background. Griffin, I thought, or possibly his mother. I could hear a voice rising, someone saying the word florist. And then something I couldn't make out. And then what sounded like a door slamming. Melissa came back on the line and said she needed to call me back. She did not call me back that night. The next morning, the wedding day, I did what I had told her I'd do. I stayed home. I didn't watch a live stream. I made myself a good breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, sat on my back porch with my coffee, and watched the birds at my feeder. It was a cool October morning, the kind with a low haze that burns off by 9. I had done what I had done, and there was nothing else to do. Roberta called me at 11 to check on me. I told her I was fine, and I meant it. I found out what happened at the wedding from 3 different sources over the next several days, which meant I got a fairly complete picture. Griffin's family had apparently told the bridal party and some guests that the wedding would have a very specific floral vision. His mother had been describing the arrangements for months. When the ceremony began with plain folding chairs and no arch installation, no centerpiece flowers at the tables, just the venue's basic setup, people noticed. His mother, from what I was told, made her displeasure known loudly during the reception cocktail hour. The cake was a sheet cake from a grocery store. Griffin's sister had apparently driven to 3 places the morning of the wedding trying to find something suitable. She found a white sheet cake with roses piped on the edges. It served the guest, but it was not the 4-tier custom creation with sugar flowers and monogrammed details that had been planned. The DJ situation was handled by someone pulling a Spotify playlist on a laptop through the venue's speakers, which cut out twice during the reception. And at some point during the reception, Griffin's father sat down with Griffin and Melissa and demanded to know what had happened. And that is when the conversation my daughter had been avoiding for 4 months finally happened, in full at her own wedding reception, in front of a table of extended family members who absolutely heard everything. Griffin hadn't known about the credit card. He hadn't known his mother-in-law, me, had been paying for deposits. He believed his parents were covering the vendors through a family account. His parents believed the same. The money had existed in a story Melissa told to bridge the gap between what they were willing to give and what the wedding actually cost. She had put it on my card and told herself, not me, that she'd sort it out before anyone noticed. Griffin's father, I was told, said very little. He had the kind of controlled quiet that's worse than shouting. He asked 2 questions. He asked whose credit card it was, and he asked whether the mother had been invited to the wedding. When he had the answers to both questions, he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked away from the table. I'm told the rest of the reception was not particularly festive. Melissa called me on Sunday afternoon. I let it ring the first time, not out of cruelty. I was in the garden and my hands were dirty. I called her back 20 minutes later. She talked for a long time. She cried. She apologized, and I want to be fair to her. The apology was real. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't full of, but you have to understand. She said she had been ashamed. Not of me, she said. She kept repeating that, but of herself. Of how much she'd stretched and pretended and tried to fit into a world that she'd decided required a version of herself that didn't include where she'd come from. She said Griffin's family had never asked her to hide me. That was entirely her own decision, built out of some fear she hadn't examined. I listened to all of it. When she was done, I said, Melissa, I love you. And because I love you, I need you to understand that what you did had consequences, and not all of them can be fixed by an apology. She said she knew. I said, the credit card balance needs to be paid back, not eventually. I need a plan with actual dates. She said she would get me a plan by the end of the week. She did. She and Griffin, who apparently had a long conversation of his own the night of the wedding, set up a monthly transfer to pay back the full amount over 12 months. The first transfer came through on the 1st of November, on schedule. That's not resolution. That's just the beginning of something. There's a lot of water that has to go under the bridge before Melissa and I are standing on solid ground again. Therapy, probably, for her and maybe for us together, and a long period of her proving through consistent action that this was a turning point and not just a moment of crisis. But I'll say this, Griffin called me himself, separate from Melissa, to apologize. He didn't have to do that. He said he was sorry for what had happened, that he should have noticed things weren't adding up, and that he wanted me to know his family's opinion of me had nothing to do with who I was. I appreciated that more than I could tell him. His mother sent a card. A real card, handwritten. She said she was sorry for the assumptions she'd allowed herself to make, that she hoped we'd have a chance to have dinner sometime soon and start fresh. I haven't responded to it yet. I'm still deciding what I want that relationship to look like. Here's the thing about staying home from your daughter's wedding. It sounds passive. It sounds like giving up or giving in. People ask me. Roberta asked me. My friend Wanda asked me why I didn't just show up anyway, just walk in, make them deal with me being there. But that's not who I am. I don't force myself into spaces where I'm told I'm not wanted. I have too much self-respect for that, and I think my daughter needed to understand that her decision to exclude me had real weight. If I'd shown up anyway, she could have written the whole thing off, crazy, dramatic mother who can't follow a simple request. The story would have been about me. By staying home and by canceling what I had every right to cancel, I made sure the story was about the choice she had made. And she had to live with that story at her own reception table, with her new husband, in front of his family, on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. That's not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I don't feel triumphant. I feel tired and sad and hopeful in a complicated, worn-down way. I feel like I'm standing at the beginning of a very long road with my daughter, and I'm glad the road exists. I'm glad she's on it with me. But I also know this. I paid off my own house with my own hands. I raised her without help. I gave her everything I had, including $8,000 she needed to cover a wedding I wasn't welcome at. And when she told me not to come, I said, okay, sweetheart. And then I handled my business. If you've ever had a child look at you and decide you weren't enough, not enough money, not enough polish, not enough of whatever it is that other people seem to have, You know the specific ache I'm talking about. It doesn't break you, but it changes the shape of something inside you, quietly, permanently. What I want other mothers to hear is this. You are allowed to have limits. Loving someone does not require you to fund the life they're building without you in it. Saying, "Okay, sweetheart," doesn't have to mean surrender. Sometimes it means, I see exactly what's happening and I'm going to handle it on my own terms. That morning in the garden, drinking my coffee, watching a sparrow work at the feeder in the cool October light. I was not a woman who had been left out. I was a woman who had decided how her own story was going to go. That's the part no one else got to take from me. I've been thinking a lot lately about the word okay, how small it sounds, how much it can carry. When Melissa sat at my kitchen table and told me not to come to her wedding, I said okay, not because I was giving up, not because I didn't have anything left to fight with. I said it because I had already done the math on what fighting would cost, and I wasn't willing to pay that price. Some people hear okay and think they've won something. Melissa heard it and thought she'd gotten away clean. What neither of us said out loud was that the word meant something completely different to each of us. That's the thing about choices. They don't disappear just because you stop talking about them. They just keep moving forward, collecting weight, until one day they land somewhere and everyone has to reckon with what's actually there. Melissa didn't lie to Griffin's family out of cruelty. I want to be honest about that, even now. She lied out of fear. She had looked at the world she was trying to enter and decided, without ever asking them, without any evidence, that I would be a liability. That a woman who paid off her own house on a dietary aid salary, who raised a child alone for 27 years, who never once asked her daughter for anything in return, that woman was something to be managed, minimized, kept off stage. That decision came entirely from inside Melissa, and it cost her the exact thing she was trying to protect, the image she'd spent months carefully building. That's how it usually works. The thing you try hardest to hide tends to be the thing that surfaces most dramatically. You can't outrun a truth you haven't dealt with, not forever. Melissa learned that at her own reception table, in front of Griffin's family, with a grocery store sheet cake on the dessert table and a Spotify playlist running through a laptop speaker, the gap between what she described and what was actually there. That gap was the story of everything she'd been carrying. I don't say that to punish her. I say it because I think there's something important in understanding that we don't escape consequences by avoiding hard conversations. We just reschedule them, usually at the worst possible time. What I had to hold on to during those weeks of waiting was something I've come to believe through simple lived experience. That integrity is its own kind of foundation. I didn't cancel those vendors to hurt my daughter. I canceled them because I had extended trust. That trust had been used without honesty, and I had every right to stop funding a situation I'd been asked to stay out of. That wasn't revenge. It was just clarity about what I owed and what I didn't. The hard part, and I won't pretend it wasn't hard, was doing all of it without anger as the engine. Anger would have made me call Melissa that first night and say everything I was feeling. Anger would have made the whole thing about me, about my hurt, about making sure she knew how wrong she was. And then the story would have been about a dramatic mother, not about a daughter who had made choices with real consequences. Roberta asked me once if I was proud of how I handled it. I told her I wasn't sure proud was the right word. I was at peace with it. There's a difference. Pride is about performance. Peace is about knowing you acted according to who you actually are. That's what I want to leave with anyone who's sitting with something similar right now. A child who's made you feel invisible. A relationship where your love has been treated like a resource rather than a gift. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to collapse to prove you were hurt. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop participating in an arrangement that doesn't respect you and let the absence speak. The morning of the wedding, I sat on my back porch and watched a sparrow at my feeder. And I was not a woman who had been left out of her daughter's life. I was a woman who knew exactly who she was, and nobody, not Griffin's family, not the guest list, not the venue in Dublin, nobody gets to take that from you. That's the only thing that's ever really been mine to keep.